we said this game was going to be a lot of fun to watch. It was not, but the result I think has led to what should be a lot of fun discourse. That's Connor Hope. I'm Brian Rauf with the Heat Check CBB here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel, talking about Villanova's overtime upset win over Creighton. It was ugly to watch. We said Villanova had to make it that way for themselves to win, and they did, and it worked to perfection. But the conversation is going to revolve a lot about Creighton. Before we get into that with the Blue Jays, though, from a Villanova perspective, they needed this, right? Coming in on the string of a handful of pretty bad losses. They did have the UCLA win in there. What do we make of Villanova now before we start diving into things that may be wrong with Creighton?
I mean, they're like it's a team that's going to win off the effort of its front court, which is something that we have not said about Villanova in any recent years, right? Villanova's always been guards. And I still think they have that in Justin Moore. He didn't play in this game. He ended up not playing.
The other part too.
Yeah.
They won this without Justin Moore.
But Burton dominated without taking shots. Like, he dominated in a way where he didn't need to score. And Eric Dixon just absorbed all of his shots. I think this is a statement win for Kyle Neptune, showing that he can go on the road. He was of the past 2 days, he was the only Big East coach to win a road game. The other two upsets were both home victories. Went on the road without his best guard and beat a top 15 team in the country. And, you know, without getting anything from TJ Bamba, without getting much from Longino in the way of like efficient scoring, without getting anything really. I mean, Mark Armstrong was okay in this game, but, you know, not great. It was the Burton, Dixon, and Hart off the bench show.
Yeah.
For Villanova. I think the way this game played, you said it wasn't fun to watch. Ugly game was always going to benefit Villanova. And that's how it happened. I'm surprised I thought if they were going to win, it was going to have to be in regulation when we got like deeper into that second half. They won in overtime. I think this is it. For Villanova, it gives them vindication, proves that they're there, proves that they're a top 5 team, likely in the conference at their best, at their peak, a top 5 team in the conference. They're going to make the tournament. I think it brings up a more interesting conversation about Creighton than it does about Villanova, because I think this Villanova, like, how often are you going to get 32 points from Eric Dixon? How often is he going to shoot 40% on 10 shots from 3? How often are you going to, have Burton, just dominate the defensive boards in the way that he did? And I know he's done it a couple of times, but like to that degree, where like I would have expected almost the lines to be flipped with Burton scoring and Dixon's rebounding. Longino, I said he didn't give you anything scoring. I think I mentioned that. Everything else he did well. Rebounding, distributing the ball, playing defense. Like, Longino was just out there to be the glue guy, and he did that at an elite level. Scoring wise, it was just, Burton, Dixon, and Dixon and Hart scored 42 of the 68 points for Villanova. So ugly game, benefited them. We need a real conversation about Creighton.
Yeah, well, this was the best game Hakeem Hart had played. Dixon played like he did in Atlanta when Villanova was at its best. Like, I think that's the recipe for Villanova moving forward. Whether they stick with that, we'll see. But yes, Creighton. They miss Ryan Emhart badly.
Yes.
The lack of a point guard was obvious. The lack of an offensive direction really was obvious and puzzling. And we're a month and a half, almost 2 months into the season now, and I don't know what Creighton really has to hang its hat on necessarily. Like they're bad games and when they've shot poorly, we get that, but they haven't been able to dig themselves out and find other ways to be successful when they haven't had things going offensively the way that we are used to Creighton teams having them going.
Yeah, and it was weird too because this was also a home game, and I figured, the other two poor shooting performances were at neutral sites, where I think like UNLV was essentially a road game,
Mm-hmm.
where they didn't necessarily have the crowd behind them. I mean, this was like you said, Stephen Ashworth came in. I thought he was going to be real. Like I thought he was one of the best guard transfers in the portal. He has been bad
Yeah.
for Creighton. I'm trying to be as nice as possible. He's been bad for Creighton. You had another game. I mean, but you had another game though where Shireman and Trey Alexander couldn't make anything. Trey Alexander didn't shoot them out of this game, but at least Alexander and Shireman gave Creighton work on the boards. Like they rebounded at a really high level. Ashworth just seems like that jump up in level has just really been difficult. And maybe I'd have to look at the numbers for tempo for Utah. I mean, Utah State doesn't play as fast as Creighton does. Maybe that's been an issue for him, but something's been really off with Stephen Ashworth. And I think that and combined with the debt, like they have no other options
right
to play at the one.
Right. And that's a problem. I think his issue comes in the trying to find the balance of being a facilitator and being a scorer. Because he was really good at Utah State and was highly rated coming into the portal because of the things he could do scoring the ball and shooting. And he good passer, he had good assist numbers and everything like that, but he is a score first, shoot first kind of guy and was featured in that role at Utah State. He is not in the same place in the pecking order at Creighton, right? He's fourth at best. Shireman, Kalkbrenner, and Trey Alexander are going to be ahead of you. So as a result, you have to be more of a facilitator. You have to be deferring more to those guys as opposed to being the guy at Utah State. And I don't think he's made that adjustment well or found a way to impact the game the way he needs to for Creighton to be where we thought they would be and meet those preseason expectations.
Yeah. It's been tough. I mean, I just think Creighton, and they weren't really like that last year, either in terms of this last year, and I'll get to my point, but they didn't force a lot of turnovers last year, but they still found ways to generate tempo. I think part of their issue this year, honestly, is the lack of depth. Like they just can't play fast because they can't run up and down the floor. But they're not generating turnovers. And last year you saw like they weren't unbelievably fast. They were in the middle of the country in tempo. But they liked to get out with Ryan Nembhard leading some fast breaks at points, and they just haven't been able to do that this year. But I think that the 3-point shooting really is to their detriment, in my opinion. Like they like to shoot a lot of threes. They always have, but they have Ryan Kalkbrenner, who should be able to do maybe not everything he wants on the interior for this team offensively, but against Villanova, like he should be taking a decent amount of shots. He shouldn't be 9 shots while Shireman and Trey Alexander are missing 17 and 15, or I guess 11 and 9 shots in a game. When you're going up against, I'm going to sound like Mick Cronin now, when you're going up against Eric Dixon and Burton, in a game where you're making threes, yes, shoot the threes. But when you're not making threes and Kalkbrenner 6 of 9 from the floor, going up against 2 players that are clearly inferior to him, like you need to pick and choose your battles. And I think the fact that in this game, even they only took 24 shots from 3, they still weren't making them. And I understand shooters shoot, but like Shireman and Trey Alexander were also finding success on the interior.
Mhm.
Like, it wasn't like they were just missing shots and they couldn't shoot from anywhere. Like they were playing pretty well when they weren't shooting from three, and it's frustrating every time they shoot a three. And I've talked about this. I mean, I recorded with Greg the Grant Nelson game yesterday, and this wasn't quite on the same level as Grant Nelson's shooting night from Alabama yesterday. But I mean, it's just when a team is shooting and they continue to shoot and they continue to shoot and they continue to miss, and then they lose that game, which has been the case for Creighton for all three of their losses. When your team has to shoot 30% from three to win a game, it's difficult for me to say that, maybe one fluke shooting performance I can forgive. Two, I was willing to overlook. When it happens a third time in 7 games, 6 games, at that point, it's like, is Creighton really as good? Like, even their core four, is their core four as good as we thought they were?
Yeah, and I think fit plays into that too. And we have to find out. I do think it is worth mentioning that when Creighton went on their 6-game losing streak last season, it was about this time, and Kalkbrenner was out for a majority of that time, but they also shot incredibly poorly during that stretch too, which played a big role in why they lost those 6 games in a row. Maybe it's just something with this time of year with this group, and then they find their footing again. But they're not going to have a lot of time to get things back on track. They play Marquette on Saturday. Desperate Marquette team. After, like, one of those teams going to be 0-2 in Big East play after Saturday. And then I would favor Marquette in that game. And then I think you could hear some real alarm bells coming out of Omaha. Because this is a team that was not shy about having Final Four expectations, both internally and externally from the fan base. That's what they expect from this group. And for them to be struggling the way they are against the better teams that they have played, not a good sign.
Like, who they beat Alabama, and I have questions about Alabama. You heard me just rant about Grant Nelson. Who has Creighton beat outside of Alabama? Iowa? Nebraska?
Yeah. They struggled the first half against Iowa. And I mean, Nebraska was the best performance of the season so far, just from a level of play. And Nebraska is certainly much improved this season, but I don't know if any Creighton fan wants to hang their hat and their NCAA tournament resume on having a dominant win over Nebraska.
And what's so frustrating to me too with this, because I went on record and I battled, and I said Creighton's still really good. Like, I understand they got smoked by Colorado State one shooting night, but like, look what they've done since then. They played really well against Oklahoma State. They played really well against Nebraska. They did what they had to do against Central Michigan. And then they're the type of team that goes, we're going to drop a game against UNLV and follow that up with a close win against Alabama at home, and follow that up with an overtime loss against Villanova. And like, it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
As someone who defended Creighton after that Colorado State loss, it's frustrating. And you look at their next couple of games, right? They played Marquette, then at Marquette, which I think they dropped, at Georgetown, which who knows? Because I think, while Georgetown isn't good, Creighton hasn't shown that they can consistently shoot. And you give Ed Cooley a glimmer of hope as a coach, like, he's going to take advantage of it. They play at home against Providence. Should be a win.
Right. Like, yeah. Like, looking at the schedule, like, as you're going down, I'm looking at the UConn Creighton game on January 17th.
Mm-hmm.
You have Marquette next, and then it's at Georgetown, Providence at home, at DePaul, St. John's at home.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go 4-1 in that stretch.
They're going to go 3-2.
Going into UConn.
Telling you right now.
I think 3-2 is most likely. I think there's a chance they go 2-3.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go 2-3 going into that UConn game at UConn, which I'm just going to chalk up as a loss, assuming Klingon is healthy. Like things could be real iffy here. Things could be
It's
real,
at
real iffy.
UConn and then at Seton Hall.
Right. Yeah, like this. I think we're getting to a crucial 5-game stretch here for Creighton that's going to determine the rest of their season. It starts with Marquette on Saturday, which is not good, but we'll see how Creighton does in that game. For Connor Hope, I'm Brian Rauf. Thank you all very much for watching us here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel. Make sure you check out heatcheckcbb.com as well. And we'll be back throughout this week and weekend to break down all the top games across the entire college basketball world.